Good morning and or good afternoon, I should say, Anthony.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Thank you very much for being here on podcast and taking some time for us. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Happy to.
So, could you please? I know many people know you already, but for those who don't, could you please quickly tell us who you are, what is your medical specialty, what you do, and how you've been involved into the keto carnivore nutrition.
Sure. So, my name is Dr. Anthony Chaffee. I'm an American physician, and I currently work in Australia. I'm a neurosurgical resident here. They call it registrar, and I also have a private practice in functional medicine, metabolic health. So I try to address underlying metabolic issues with diet and lifestyle primarily, and then allopathic medicine secondarily. And I came to sort of a carnivore way of thinking 20 some years ago, like 24 years ago, when I was taking cancer biology. My professor was going over all the different toxins that plants had and how they could be quite carcinogenic. And I already had taken biology and botany, so that made sense because I knew that plants had defensive mechanisms that they use to protect themselves from being eaten. Just like every living thing has a defense, plants are no different, and chemicals are their defense.
Mm.
So we were learning that they were carcinogenic as well, which isn't all that surprising when you stop to think about it, but it was certainly shocking and surprising to me and to us at the time. And so we ended up being very, very shocked. We were looking around wildly to see who was in on the joke. He must be joking. There must be someone here that's trying to hold it together and not laugh. And no one was. And it ended up dawning on us that, okay, this guy's actually serious. Like, okay, we don't know how to deal with that. And I remember thinking in my head, and I was like, but vegetables are still good for you, right? Even though they have all these carcinogens in them. Because he was telling us there was like 136 carcinogens just in Brussels sprouts and over 100 in mushrooms and over 80 and over 60, 80 and more in things like spinach and broccoli and kale and all these fruits and vegetables that we would always eat and be told, oh, we have to eat, 3 fruit and veg or 5 fruit and veg and 8 fruit and 13 veg. I mean, it's always going up as of what we require, but it's it was crazy to me that this was being said now that no, actually these things are actually quite harmful. And I remember thinking in my head, I was like, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And he just looked at us and gave us a funny look, and he said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I
Okay.
don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. So I said, right, screw plants. I'm just not going to eat these things anymore. And so I stopped, and I wasn't doing a carnivore diet per se. I was just not eating carbs or not eating plants. And so that was my main thing, was I was just not going to eat plants.
Okay.
And so I had to default into just eating eggs and meat because there wasn't anything else to eat. I was like walking around the store, I'm like, well, what the hell do I eat? Everything is made out of plants or uses plants. And, you walk around a store, almost everything there is plant based or entirely plant.
Okay.
And so I just defaulted into eggs and meat, and I never felt better in my entire life. I ended up doing that for about 5 years, and then I started slipping off. Just because I was living in England and the food, I didn't have the same access to meat. Some of it was breaded. And I said, oh, well, is it that big a deal? Dose makes the poison. Maybe it's not all that bad. And that's what they say now. Well, yes, there's toxins in plants, but dose makes the poison. But they never tell you what the dose is. So if you ever hear someone say, well, dose makes the poison, always follow up. What is the dose? What is the poison and what is the dose? Right? Because they won't be able to tell you. And if they can't tell you, then they're just talking out of their ass. So I can tell you the dose is really damn small. And so just having a bit of breaded chicken, like a couple times a week, that was enough to screw up my results and to mess with my health. And then the main thing was it opened the door to like other things slipping in when it wasn't just, black and white, no plants, not at all. It was just like, well, maybe some plants, maybe it's not so bad. And then a little bit started coming in, a little bit started coming in. And I just stopped thinking about it and went back to my, normal ways of eating that I'd, grown up with, which was whole food diet with, you know, vegetables and bread and things like that involved, but not that much bread, and meat, mostly meat anyway. And I was not as healthy. I did not feel as good. I did not perform as well on the rugby field, not even close to as good or as effortlessly as I did in between 20 and 25. And I just chalked it up to getting older. I was over the hill now. I was 25. So it's just, you're just dying now, and your life is just, getting on top of you. And it wasn't until I was like 13 years later, when I was 38, I was a doctor at this point, and just didn't feel great, didn't have great energy. But when I pushed myself and worked out, I could get into shape. And so that's what I was trying to do. I was back from Bangladesh doing humanitarian work there, and I was trying to get back into shape so I could play rugby, because I missed playing rugby. But I felt horrible, and I had no energy. I was hungry all the time. I was trying to slim down, so I was eating just lean meat and not that much of it. I was eating a lot of vegetables. I wasn't eating any carbs, no sugar, no alcohol. I never drank during the rugby season anyway. And I just felt wretched. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not ready to go back to play rugby yet. I'll just die. And then I came across information that said, no, humans actually are carnivores as a species. That's just the kind of animal we are. And I was like, right. And that's what I was doing for 5 years. And that's when I felt better than I've ever felt in my entire life. And it was when I started slipping off of it, was when I started feeling not my best. And so I said, right, I knew it. I knew plants were trying to kill me, get rid of these stupid things. And I started just eating meat again. And I started eating a lot more fatty meat, cut out all the vegetables. And I lost 23 pounds in 10 days. And then I felt, which is about 10 kilos. And I just started feeling just better than I ever had since I was in my early 20s. So I felt at 38, I felt like I was 22 again. Felt amazing, dropped a ton of weight right away. I still had a long way to go, but I felt amazing. I said, right, it's time to go back and start playing rugby. So at 38, I went out and started playing professional rugby again, and was able to keep up with everybody mid-season, no problem. Just diet. I was at a dead sprint, could just push myself as hard as I wanted to, and just no let up the whole time. Wasn't sore the next day, wasn't having any problems, and I just felt amazing. So I said, okay, there really is something to this, and I need to really look into it more. And so I started digging into the research, digging into the literature, and asking questions and trying to find studies that I could test my questions against in the literature. And I found that there's absolutely a ton of information and evidence for this. It's just this information isn't being publicized by the big industries, the big food, the big pharma companies, because there's no product at the end of it, right? And so, while different sorts of things will have a product, a sugar or this or that, or a probiotic, there's people can spend money on this, on the research, but then they can spend millions of dollars getting this out to news organizations, paying them to run it as a story, paying for commercials, and paying for sales reps to go to hospitals and cater a lunch for doctors and say, oh, hey, here's this new study that shows X, Y, and Z, and wouldn't you know, we have a product for that. So there's no product at the end of the line for this. It's just the product is good health. And, unfortunately or fortunately, you don't have to buy that. You don't have to pay for it. You can just do it. But because of that, there's no profit model incentive to get this information out there to doctors or patients. And that's why we have to do it by word of mouth. And so that's why I'm trying to be doing this in my professional career ever since then, in the last 6+ years, to try to get this out to as many people as I could. This is why I started my podcast and my YouTube channel. And then that's the main thing. I started, looking at medicine from the point of view of humans being carnivores and just not eating in the correct way. And then all of a sudden, everything started slotting into place with all the chronic diseases and issues that we have, which we shouldn't be as sick as we are. No animal is sick. No plant is sick out in nature. It's just the natural state of life is healthy. Yeah, right? Is that of health. And so if something's unhealthy, if the entire population is unhealthy, there's something going on that's not normal. So something's going on in their environment. And I think that is the large majority of that has to do with us eating the wrong foods.
And well, the word carnivore is used obviously now very much, and we could use animal-based nutrition as well. But how would you define carnivore diet or carnivore nutrition for someone who's hasn't been uh,
Yeah.
exposed to it?
Generally, when people think of doing carnivore, they just think that just eat a lot more meat. The carnivore I think of that I think is best, and it's not necessarily that everyone has to do what I say, but I do think that this is what gives people the best health results, is really exclusively eating meat and not eating other things, but just eating a lot more fatty meat, not being afraid of the fat, not being afraid of the meat itself. Oh, it's going to cause diabetes or can't. No, it's not. Or heart disease. No, it's not. Absolutely is not. That's an absolute farce. And just eating more fatty meat is going to make you more healthy. Those are the things that we need. Those are the nutrition. That's the nutrition that we have to have because we are carnivores. That's what all the best evidence shows, is that we've been carnivores, apex predators for over 2 million years. Apex predators are by definition carnivores, and we've been carnivores before that. And so, in fact, people say, evolutionary biologists and archaeologists say that we are human because our ancestors became carnivores. So not only are we carnivores, but we were carnivores before we were even human. Our ancestors were carnivores. That's what drove us into these biological changes that culminated in Homo sapiens and humanity and Neanderthals and Homo erectus and all these other sorts of things, all carnivores all the way back, right? And so to me, I think that's the pinnacle, is just eating meat. We were eating plants because we were starving, we had to forage, or we went to agriculture, all these sorts of things. But that's out of necessity, and it was generally the poorer people, since agriculture, that have had to subsist on grains and plant-based foods because they couldn't afford or have access to the meat that was held for the aristocracy, for the gentry, for the nobility, and for the rich. And so there's this very much a two-tier system, and they probably liked it that way because it kept people sick and docile and weak, and they could be easily controlled and manipulated that way, which is what it may be what's going on now with people trying to push into this plant-based dogma and say that meat's going to kill the planet and it's all horrible. And the WEF, there's just a hotel room full of Bond villains. It's like they're trying to tell everybody to stop eating meat while they've got plates and plates of meat being served at their dinners. Of course it's not going to be for them. It's not going to apply to them. They don't actually think it's better for the planet. They don't actually think that it's better for health. They want us to do that so that we can be sick and docile and easily controlled. That's my view anyway. And that's a trick that's been played for thousands of years in humanity. You can look back at multiple examples throughout history. And so I think that the best thing to do is eat meat. You want to eat meat that has all the necessary nutrients that you require. But I think it's important, just as important, what not to eat, because those other things can actually cause harm. Not only do they not give as much nutrients, but they actually can be harmful to you. So my hard rule for myself, and what I think is optimal, is no plants or mushrooms, no sugar or any sweeteners, nothing artificial. And that will go for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. And so you sort of play against that. Okay, what about coffee? Well, it's a plant. Well, what about honey? That's sugar. What about spices? Well, they're a plant. And what about red dye 40? Like, well, that's artificial. Don't touch it. So I just try to keep it clean. Clean whole meat and eggs, and that's it. But if people just eat more fatty meat, more eggs, more these sorts of eggs, if they can do it, some people react poorly to them. Then you're going to be doing better, and you're cutting out all the processed garbage. You cut out carbs, you cut out sugar, you cut out seed oils. These are all going to improve your health. And I think that the more and more you cut out and you just get to meat, the better that you're going to do. And what I've found in myself and in my patients is that you get rid of the last 5% of plants. You really just get down to just fatty meat and water. That's where the most benefits come from, is in that last little stretch.
I think that's very important to say that for a lot of people I've encountered and I've talked about the carnivore diet, I find that they probably think that people who go into a carnivore diet are meat lovers. We love meat. That's why we have a passion for meat, and which is not we like meat, but it's not the case that we don't go carnivore because we love meat. And as you said and you mentioned very correctly, we don't want the plants anymore, or we get rid of them. We get rid of sugar and we get rid of vegetable oils, and then at some point we reach the meat because that's the only thing that is not harmful that is left.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that people don't usually get right away when they hear about it.
Yeah, they think that you just need to eat more meat and then that's fine. Not really thinking about it in that sense that some things that we can eat, maybe not just that they're not as nutritious, they're not as nutrient dense, but they're actually harmful. And people generally don't think of vegetables as being harmful, but they objectively are. And when you cut them out and you see just how much they affect you when you get rid of them, I mean, you can see for yourself. You don't need a study to do that. In fact, all studies can do is help guide your decision-making process. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to go through trial and error. You're going to have to try it yourself. And if you get positive results, then you get positive results. If you get negative results, you get negative results. It doesn't matter what the study says. And so that's what you need to do. You try for yourself and you start cutting these things out. And if your health improves and you feel better, well, then there was something holding you back. Plain and simple. If you add those things back in and you start getting these problems again, well, there's a cause and effect relation there. If you remove a causative factor, the effect should go away, and you return the causative factor, the effect comes back. That's a clear demonstration of cause and effect. And so you can just do that. And I've done that in myself. I already know that that's the case. And then I've researched this heavily. And so I can name out different toxins and tell you some of the things that they do and at what doses and all these sorts of things that no one tells you about, and they certainly don't put it on the packets and the labels and everything like that of all these plant foods. Like cyanide. Cyanide is so common. It's in flaxseed, it's in almonds, it's in cassava, which is the #1 calorie source for 750 million people around the world, mostly in the tropics. And there's actually quite a high amount of cyanide in it. The WHO and the CDC said there is no safe amount of cyanide that you can ingest. So you shouldn't be saying, hey, look, you can have up to this. I've seen some things that said, up to 10 milligrams a day is the maximum safe daily limit. And other places that said, absolutely not. Do not take in any cyanide. Where the hell is that on almonds? Where is that on flaxseed? Where is that on a pack of cassava chips? It doesn't say anything about that. It doesn't say, hey, be careful about giving this to your kid because it could give them low-grade cyanide poisoning. Low-grade cyanide exposure, sublethal cyanide exposure over time, even small amounts, can cause thyroid dysfunction, goiters, and neurological damage. And that can be permanent. And that can cause developmental delays and quite serious side effects and can just kill you. People don't realize this, but that 10 milligrams thing is just like maximum amount. I mean, the CDC and WHO say just nothing is acceptable, right? So why isn't that saying that on a packet of cassava or almonds or flaxseed, right? Because that has cyanide in it. In fact, one serving of flaxseed can have as much as 6 milligrams of cyanide, right? So that's very close to that 10, and also obviously it's above 0. So according to many authorities, you shouldn't have it at all. But as little as 50 milligrams of cyanide can kill you, right? The range is, there is a range, but the range of a lethal dose is 0.5 milligrams per kilogram to 3.5 milligrams per kilogram. So it's a wide range, right? But if you have a 100-kilo person, which is a big dude, right? That's my size. As little as 50 milligrams can kill you.
Wow.
Or, up to 350 milligrams, but, as little as 50 milligrams, right? So why play with that? And what about a child who only weighs 10 kilos, right? As little as five milligrams can kill them. So that's one serving of flaxseed. So you give your kid a smoothie, a green smoothie with a bunch of flaxseed in it, and some almond milk and whole apples. because all apples are good, aren't they? And you don't core them and take the seeds out. Well, there's a lot of cyanide in those seeds. That's why they're so bitter. And you put those in there and you give your kid a big whack of cyanide, you can actually do some real harm to them, and you could potentially kill them. There was a study where they went to like smoothie shops around America and just sampled the smoothies for cyanide. They didn't even look for other things. And they found actually quite high amounts of cyanide just in these smoothies people were selling. Is that anywhere? Does anybody know that they're ingesting decent amounts of cyanide with the whole apples, the almond milk, and almond juice, and the flaxseed, right? So this is actually a real issue, that they don't talk about, and
And
that's,
have you
dose makes the
seen,
poison. Well, what's the dose, buddy?
yeah, but have you seen like patients during your practice being poisoned with cyanide?
So I'm not in that field. So
Okay.
I wouldn't see it either way. The thing is that you can get these low grade exposures long before you get a fatal dose,
Oh,
and
okay.
you can just have low grade problems, neurological dysfunction, thyroid dysfunction, and you don't know why. You have no idea. People just don't know why. There's like, oh, my thyroid's a bit banged up. Okay, well, we don't know why. We'll just put you on thyroid medication. Okay, but why are they damaged? Why is there? I mean, the thyroid is supposed to work. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very rare that you find a lion's thyroid that doesn't work properly. The koala's thyroid doesn't work properly. Then the elephant's thyroid doesn't work properly. If everyone's just sick and falling apart, like, I mean, that species just doesn't make it.
Yeah.
And we've been the most dominant species in the history of the earth, but that's only up until recently that we've actually been healthy and able to maintain that. So we became the most dominant species on Earth during the ice ages. And I think because of the ice ages, because we were forced to only eat meat, our ancestors were forced to become apex predators and manifest our destiny as apex predators. And that allowed us to thrive under these conditions. And so now we're having all these low grade problems. So, I mean, who knows? People having so many people have thyroid dysfunction. Well, is that because you're eating things that contain cyanide? Cyanide does damage your thyroid. It does damage your brain and your nervous system. It damages your mitochondria. It stops the electron transport chain to make ATP. So your entire body slows down and shuts down. And so even subclinical or sublethal doses, long-term over time, can cause serious harm. And if you look at the CDC, there are quite a lot of cases of people getting cyanide poisoning and having all sorts of problems. And so, they're very clear on this, like, hey, it is not safe to ingest cyanide. But the long-term effects of cyanide can be quite devastating, and you just don't know. You're just unwell and your body's not working properly, and you just don't know why. So instead of investigating that and trying to figure that out, you generally just get prescribed a bunch of pills to try and mitigate the symptoms of that. Your thyroid's damaged, so you're just given thyroid medication. You have pain in your feet and neuropathic pain, so you're given a bunch of painkillers and things like that, even though the treatment would be get rid of these things that are causing the nerve damage in the first place, and then you don't need the painkillers, or do get rid of the thing that's causing the thyroid dysfunction in the first place, and then you don't need the thyroid hormone in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So what is the part in your work, in your practice of as a neurosurgeon and as a functional doctor, health prevention? What is the percentage? You do 50-50 or
Oh, so yeah,
20?
so normally it was like 95% in neurosurgeries because it's very, very busy. In Australia, you can sort of change things up where it's not just, you can sort of take some time off. So I was taking a few months off, and I was just doing more
Okay.
surgery a couple of times a week, and then I was doing the functional medicine thing more often. And so whereas before that I was just full on 6-7 days a week in the hospital with neurosurgery, and then sort of like on random days off I would go in on, or random days or weekends off I would go in and work on the metabolic health side of things, and then do at night and in the middle of the night and in the morning I would do things for my podcast and YouTube channel. So yeah, basically Yeah, there's a bit of a split. It's predominantly neurosurgery at the moment. It's more 50-50.
Okay. And I assume that most of your colleagues know about your views and your
Mm-hmm.
social media activity on the carnivore diet.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you think your peers perceive the message that you're bringing to the public? Do you get to talk to them, or?
Yeah. So I mean, when you're just operating, you're there all day. You know, these things come up, and you talk about them, and people ask questions, so yeah. So I it is something that comes up, and people ask questions. A lot of them become very interested in it. All of them eat a lot more meat now anyway, and some of them have gone full carnivore, and some of them have just gone near carnivore. But they all eat more meat anyway, and they're not afraid of the fat anymore. So that's really good. And there's more and more and more doctors around my area and just around the world. Neurosurgeons multiple neurosurgeons from around the world have contacted me, from Australia and America and elsewhere. Um, a guy who's become a friend of mine, Dr. David Johnson. He's over in Brisbane. He's a neurosurgeon there and a spinal specialist, and he was already aware of the benefits of animal-based diets and ketogenic diets and things like that, and was pretty much carnivore already. And then he found my YouTube channel and contacted me and said he really liked it, and so we got in contact, and we actually did an interview together, and that's up on my channel as well. And we just did a recent sort of discussion lecture series sort of thing, and Q&A sort of with their group as well. And then other neurosurgeons from the US. There's one in Tennessee who contacted me. It was a lady there who said that they really liked it, and they've been doing carnivore and they absolutely loved it, and they recommend it to their patients. And they just have a ranch with like 100 acres, and they just started buying a bunch of cows and things like that so that they could raise their own meat. So there's a lot of people that are very much into it. Jack Cruz is a well-known neurosurgeon in this field, and he's been carnivore for a long time. He's very interested in light and how that affects health, which is definitely very important. But he also does carnivore. He doesn't talk about it all that much, but as far as I understand it, he does value a carnivore diet. And just more and more and more. I mean, I'm not as active on certain things. Obviously, like things like LinkedIn is a bit more professional, but that's where I'm connected with hundreds of doctors around the world who all do this, and doctors and nurses and other health care providers and experts and nutritionists and all these sorts of things. They're all doing it, or they're interested in it, and having great success with it, and telling their patients about it. So it's actually very well received for a lot of from a lot of different people. And when I'm able to see people one-on-one and they can ask questions and we can talk about it, I've yet to have an experience where someone was just no, that's definitely not the way. They're always interested, always asking questions, and doctors are inquisitive people by nature, and you sort of have to be to study as long as you do to pass all these stupid exams. And so they ask these questions, and then you have the answers that interested them. And most of these people actually do want to do the best thing for their patients. And when you find something that really works and is evidence-based, why wouldn't you pay attention? So more and more are coming around to it. I had some patients who came in and said that their doctor who was treating their breast cancer said, don't eat any meat because it has so much estrogen in it. All these hormones that get put in it, then you have to stay away from it. You want to eat soy and other sorts of plant-based proteins instead. Obviously, this person had never, ever looked into this, because the amount of estrogen in a hormone-treated cow goes from 1.3 nanograms per 3 ounces up to 1.9 nanograms per 3 ounces for untreated and treated, right? So it's 0.6 nanograms, right? So it's a 50% bump up, which, wow, that sounds scary, 50% increase, right? But soy has like 200,000 nanograms of estrogen in it per 3 ounces. And a fertile woman would make 450, 500,000 nanograms of estrogen in a day, right? So that 0.6 nanograms is really just not going to make the radar, whereas soy will. And 6 ounces or 6 glasses of soy milk a day is enough estrogen to grow breasts in a man, and that's been published in case reports as having happened. People have recommended that people eat soy instead of when they're going through menopause, as a form of hormone replacement therapy. And you're telling someone with breast cancer that they should eat soy and not meat because you don't want as much estrogen. I mean, that makes no damn sense. But there's this whole plant-based movement has just caught people up that, oh, meat's bad, meat's horrible, meat's evil, and all these, and let me count the ways. And they don't actually look into it at all. They just hear it and they just repeat it, which is really dangerous for a doctor to do, because you're dealing with people's health. And so you're saying that this is like a definitive way, and you're the expert, you're the oncologist. You're saying, hey, you need to do this. This is important, and you haven't even looked into it. You haven't even checked. Like that is malpractice in my view. You're not even trying to get the right answer. You didn't even look into it. So that changed, because that was the first sort of thing that I would hear, and then the patients were smart enough to sort of look into that and go, like, that doesn't make sense. There's more soy, there's more estrogen, and these other sorts of things. So they were just like, okay, all right, thanks, and then just sort of didn't take that advice. Then I had patients that were referred to me who showed up, and they hadn't even they weren't referred to me. They found me on the internet because their oncologist actually put them onto a carnivore diet.
Okay.
And said, hey, you need to be on a carnivore diet to help your cancer, which is amazing. So now that tide is turning. And so then they found my videos online, and because I was in town, they came and saw me. Now I hear more and more about more and more doctors in Perth, and which is the city I'm in, and elsewhere where people are becoming more carnivore doctors. And now there's multiple carnivore cardiologists here in Perth now too. And I had a patient of mine say, he's like, oh yeah, my cardiologist is carnivore. And he said, yeah, that's the best diet you can be on, all this sort of stuff. And I was like, great. Like, this is perfect. So, the tide is definitely turning, and it's actually getting very well received by the medical establishment.
Good. Okay. I would like to ask you some questions about your specialty. So, because I think it's very important for people to understand how nutrition also impacts health and how it does it. So as our central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and as a neurosurgeon, based on your practice with patients, in your opinion, how is the carnivore diet helping to preserve good brain function? And what is the relationship between saturated fat, cholesterol, and nerves function?
Well, your nerves and your brain are just made out of fat and cholesterol. I mean, that is what our brain and our nervous system is made from. So 60-70% of our brain and nervous tissue is fat, and a lot of that cholesterol as well. The axons, which are nerve fibers that come down. So you have a cell body and this little axon that comes down. So it's basically like the computer and the little wire coming down from the computer to connect to something, either other computers or muscles or whatever. And so that axon, that cable that's coming down, that's myelinated. So it's covered in a coating in a sheath, and that helps propagate that signal. So if you have a proper myelination and proper myelin sheath, then that signal conducts faster, and it's and obviously you get better results, right? So your neurons are able to talk to each other better. You send a signal down to your hand, you're going to be able to do all this stuff quicker, right? Whereas you think of a baby, they're very uncoordinated. They can't stand up. They sort of flop down. They can't really hold themselves up and together. That's not necessarily just because their muscle definition isn't strong enough. Their coordination isn't good. They're trying to grab things in their hands, sort of moving, and they sort of can't really coordinate their fingers as well. That's because their nerves aren't myelinated properly. And so that's this period of myelination in the early infancy, that they become more coordinated, more dexterous, be able to walk and coordinate their fingers much better. And so that is made out of cholesterol and saturated fat. And you need B12 to make that. If you don't have enough B12, you're not going to be able to myelinate your nerves properly. That's not the reference range for B12. The reference range for all of these lab tests are just the average for the community. That's how that works. The first 2,000, 3,000 people that come into the lab when they're reassessing their levels, that is the reference range. And so that's not a reference range of optimal health. That's just a reference range of the average person. Well, the average person is sick. 90% of Westerners have at least one metabolic disease. 70% are overweight or obese. And we all have nutritional deficiencies if we're not eating a carnivore diet long term. So that B12 level is going down, 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 down. And so everybody's deficient in B12. So you get your B12 checked and you're in that reference range, and he says, yeah, you're in that normal range. Okay, that means you're deficient because everybody's deficient. So you're comparing yourself against deficient people, you're deficient. People don't realize that fully half or more than half of that normal reference range in most areas is actually so low, it's to the point that you can actually get demyelination of your nerves. You can get nerve damage. And so even though you have enough, if you even have enough fat and cholesterol, you don't have enough B12, you're not going to be able to keep that myelination together. So it's very, very important. And the things that are going to come with the saturated fats and the omega-3s like DHA and EPA, omega-3s from plants don't work for your brain. That's ALA, alpha linoleic acid. That's not what you need. And that doesn't really convert well into DHA and EPA. In fact, some studies show that you add in ALA, your APA might go up or your DHA goes down, right? So that's not what you want, because your brain, 20% of your brain is DHA, right? And that only comes from meat. We don't really make it very well ourselves. And so you need this from your food. So the things that are going to contain DHA and EPA should contain B12 as well. It all comes together. It's all about just proper nutrition, right? You can't get this stuff piecemeal very well. Like, you need it from a single source food. That's what animals in the wild get their nutrition from, is single source food. And so we should be able to have some sort of single source food that's going to have everything we need. And for us, that's meat. So importantly, being in a ketogenic metabolism, a non-carbohydrate driven metabolism where our insulin is down, our blood sugar is being maintained by our own bodies at a very normal level, and our ketone levels are being maintained at an adequate level so that we have enough available to our body and brain. Fully 2/3 of your brain, it primarily runs on ketones. Why do I say that when everyone says you need glucose to run your brain? First of all, you have glucose, you make it, you don't need to eat it. Second of all, no, you don't. You don't need glucose for the majority of your brain. The majority of your brain runs on ketones preferentially, because when you have enough ketones and you have enough glucose, your brain will only run on the ketones. So only when the ketones start going down that you start filling in the gaps with the glucose. That's it. And so when we start eating a lot of carbohydrates, that suppresses down the ketones significantly, so just barely trace amounts. But whatever amount of ketones are there, your brain is running on them. And the rest is being taken up by glucose, because your brain needs energy. Like, you can't just die. And so, but being in ketosis, that's your brain's primary energy source. So your brain's going to work better. It's going to run better. It's going to function better. So the cortex is run on on ketones. That's the part where you think and move and feel sensation and things like that. It's all in the cortex, visual, optic areas as well. And so very important to have ketones. It's also important to have ketones because they can cross the blood-brain barrier and reconstitute into fatty acids. And that helps build the structural components of the brain that are made out of fat. So this is why babies are in ketosis. Infants are in ketosis. Fetuses are in ketosis, right? So a fetus is in ketosis. Why? Because you need to be in ketosis to get those building blocks into the brain so the brain can grow. And then when you're an infant, even breastfeeding infants are in ketosis, even though they're drinking milk that has lactose in it. But it's very easy for a child to go into ketosis because they have to be in ketosis, because they need those ketones for their brain development. And then we start putting them on formula with a bunch of sugar and garbage, and you knock them out of ketosis, and now it retards the development of their brain. And then you're eating a bunch of carbs and sugar and grains and cereals and garbage like that. And this is going to, again, dampen down and repress the brain's development. So we saw this very clearly at the dawn of the agricultural era. So pre-agriculture, men had 11% larger brains, women had 17% larger brains. Immediately after agriculture, it dropped down by 11 and 17%. Immediately. It didn't take hundreds of years, it didn't take thousands of years. It was right away. And that persisted until today. Excuse me. So,
no, it's good.
That is that's only one of many changes. We lost height, we lost health. We had signs of infectious disease like tuberculosis, poor wound healing, smaller jaws, crooked teeth, poor dentition, all these other sorts of signs immediately after the advent of agriculture. And then we saw this in real time with the Native Australians and the Native Americans, who in the last century and a half became more adopted into Western society and sort of in some cases forced to eat a more Western diet instead of their traditional diet of predominantly meat, like the Plains Indians. They did buffalo drops and they ate bison all year round, and then the bison herds were wiped out. Can't do that anymore. You have to survive. You go to plant-based food. So there's a study in 2001 that showed that the Plains Indians in North America, they were just eating meat, basically. Not even basically, entirely, in most cases, that they were the tallest population of human beings on Earth alive at that time. And now they are not, and they would self-reported living to be 110, 115, 120 years old. One said, this guy, Chief John Smith Whitewolf, who was reported to be 137 when he died in the 1920s. People say, oh, well, no, that couldn't possibly be. Well, we don't know one way or the other because we don't have definitive birth records for him because they didn't have those. We just go by when he says that he was born, and his family and friends and all his whole civilization all said, yeah, no, that's how old he is. And yeah, that's my dad, and I'm this old and he's this much older than me, and all that sort of stuff. But say what you want, the guy, had many accounts of his experiences fighting in the War of 1812 as an adult, right? So, if you fought as an adult in the War of 1812, or you fought at all in the War of 1812, and you die in 1927, you're pretty damn old, Yeah. So, then people can say he's making it up, whatever, but that's their accounts, and that's and if we could believe the blue zones and them saying, yes, that's my grandfather, he's 105, then we have to believe them because it's exactly the same level of evidence. It's self-reported evidence. But either way, they were objectively much healthier. They didn't have these chronic diseases. They didn't get the diabetes and the heart disease and the cancers and the autoimmunities that we see as a mainstay of Western society now, back in the 1800s, and even in European Americans, let alone Native Americans. And now Native Americans are far more likely to have all these chronic diseases. They have far higher rates of chronic disease, obesity, cancer, and heart disease, diabetes, all these sorts of things, autoimmunity, far higher rates. And that's because they haven't had 10,000 years to adapt to the toxins in plants. They just had to get hit with it right away. And on top of that, it's the worst kind of plant-based diet ever in history because it's all this processed garbage with seed oils and sugar that we've never had to contend with. And so this is what's botching up everybody's health significantly, and it's hitting them the hardest. So we talk about different, health disparities in different ethnic populations and why that may be. I think that this is a major driving factor in the health disparities between different populations. We are all supposed to be eating meat. Some of us can do a little better than others on non-meat, but some get really damaged by it. They really have to just stick to only meat, even in European populations. And so, but people from Native American, Native Australian, and other populations where they haven't had exposure to agriculture until very recently, they are much, much, much less healthy than other people eating the exact same food.
I guess that's the case also. You live in Australia with Aborigines, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I first got here, I was told day one that whatever age you get a patient that's an Aboriginal patient, whatever their age is on that docket, you add 20 years to that because they just age so much faster than other people. And so you have to consider them, someone in their 30s as an elderly patient, because they're just going to get all the weird cancers and heart disease and diabetes and all these other sorts of things. Because normally in medicine, you sort of think like, well, okay, where is the peak for these sorts of things? What's more common in the 20 to 30s, the 30s to 40s, and so on. And so it was, okay, this guy's 35 was common for a 35-year-old, because so many different things can present very similarly and have very similar symptoms. And so you have to play odds, and you have to sort of have a differential where you're saying, okay, this is the most likely, followed by this, followed by this, followed by this. And so you start at the top and you investigate for that and say, okay, yeah, that's it. Job done. Okay, well, maybe it's not that. Okay, what's the next one on the list? Oh, let's look for that one. Not that one either. What about that one? What about that one? That one, that one. And you just go down the list. But you go with what's most likely. So you play odds, right? And so in the Aboriginal population, the Native Australian population, the odds are that they're going to get some of these worst diseases that you normally only see in older adults. They'll get those things as younger adults.
Yeah.
And so it just completely changes things around, because I feel that they get hit much harder because of the agrarian food that we're eating now, as opposed to just meat. And even more so, I have a patient of mine that works with the Native Australian populations, and apparently they know this in their own community, that if you're eating, normal food, and what we call normal food in cities and everything like that, you're living in the cities and eating that sort of crap, and you just go and go and go until you get very sick. Well, what you do is you don't go to, to the traditional doctors and hospitals. You go out into the bush and you live with your relatives out there who are living more traditionally, and you start, you're living out there and you're hunting and fishing and living out in the wild and living that lifestyle, and you get better and you heal up, and then you reverse all these diseases, and then you go back in the city and start it all over again.
Yeah, and I think for whoever is interested in it, we could quote the excellent work from Weston Price. That was pretty much what he went and study differences between same population being exposed and not exposed, and how this affected their health.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you saw great disparities between people, even in the same families, who were sort of eating slightly different diets. So it wasn't genetic. And then you could reverse a lot of these things, these malformations of the jaw and the teeth and other health issues, by giving them more meat and more highly nutritious and highly nutritionally dense, and animal foods, raw milk, whole eggs, all these sorts of things, meat, that significantly changed their health for the better.
And so there's two things I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned vitamin B12. So the other day I have a friend who's in a medical school in France, and he sent me a video of his teacher, of a professor, lecturing about vitamin B9 and vitamin B12. And the prof was basically saying that it's almost impossible to be B12 deficient, as we have 4 years reserve in our liver. So he was criticizing the values that doctors may see sometimes at the hospital on patients, and saying that if the value were too low, it would be related to a problem in the tube, or the patient would have a medical condition like the Birmer disease or a myeloma. But it wouldn't be a physiological B12 deficiency by itself. So what do you think of that statement?
And it's more difficult to get deficient with B12 to the point of threatening your life, because it takes a very long time for this to get out of your system. Your body, really hold on to this, especially when you get down to lower levels. But no, that's completely untrue. You can absolutely get problems from this. You can get deficiencies. What are we defining as a deficiency? Deficiency to the point of dying? Okay, fine. But vegans do this and they don't take B12, they can get to. I've had a patient that crippled himself because his B12 was so low, and so he got demyelination. He got nerve damage to the point that he couldn't walk. He couldn't get out of bed. He was bedridden. He was just on his phone. He could just sort of text on his phone and go online and surf and things like that, and that was it. And then one morning he woke up and his hands had worsened to the point that he couldn't even hold his phone. He couldn't even use his phone anymore. His thumb wouldn't work properly. And that's when he realized, okay, my diet's killing me. And he started eating meat right away. And within months, he was doing much better, and he was out of bed and going to the gym and rehabilitating himself. So no, you can absolutely get B12 deficiency. Of course you can. There are people that say you don't actually need folate as long as you have enough B12. They do similar sorts of things. And so as long as you have B12, you don't need folate. But, the idea that, and that you don't need B12, that you can't get a deficiency. Of course you can. It's rare that you get a fatal deficiency, or you get to the point that, that gentleman did. But vegans and vegetarians are really working hard to try to make become a statistic on this, because they are they're not taking in any B12. You can't get a deficiency because it takes 4 years. Well, you just said that you could get a deficiency. It just takes 4 years. Like that, you literally just said that, right? And if you're chronically under eating, or you're under eating B12, or you're eating a whole bunch of plants that have anti-nutrients that block out the absorption of B12, you'll get lower and lower and lower. And the thing is that there's a big difference between a fatal deficiency and being suboptimal and not being able to function and carry out all your normal basic functions. Like survival is very different than being as healthy as we can be. Those are two very different things. So in UK and Australian numbers, I don't know what it is in Europe. The range can be anywhere between what was it, like 100, 150, 130 to 650, 750, something like that, and that's normal, right? And that's in picomoles per liter. So between 130 and 650 or 750 picomoles per liter of B12.
450 here. Last time I did the check.
Yours was 450?
No. It was the highest range was 450, if I recall.
Oh, really? And that was that picomoles per liter? Do you know?
Yeah, I can confirm that to you.
Yeah,
but I think so. Yes, and
okay.
Mine was around 600. That was a year ago when I started Carnivore.
Okay.
Fully, but
so fun fact: anything below 400 can cause nerve damage and demyelination of your nerves. So the 90% of that range is actually in a clear deficiency, right? So what are we calling a deficiency? I think that anything where you get nerve damage is a deficiency, right? You're actually causing harm to your body. It's not even that you're not able to carry out your normal functions and processes. You're actually causing harm to your body because of your inefficiency to carry out your normal processes. So below 400 can cause nerve damage.
So sorry, the range was 145 to 569, and that's in picomole per liter.
Yeah, and still that's and that's the UK is very similar as well. But every lab will be different too, because it's the reference range is the average for that lab. It's not even that country or that city. It's like every lab in every city will have different reference ranges. But yeah, so 560 is way too low, right? But that's the thing, everyone's too low. And so that professor, he's probably going off of those, and he's like, oh yeah, you're never going to see someone with a deficiency. Like, yeah, because they'd be dead by the time they get down to 120. They're going to be so sick. It's just ridiculous. But most people are deficient, and so that's what they're calling this normal range. There's a famous Oxford study back in 2008 where they followed a bunch of vegans and found that their brains actually shrank by 5% over 5 years. Right? Yeah. And so obviously they're not getting in the DHA, the EPA, probably interrupting, screwing up their cholesterol because they're taking a bunch of plant sterols, which stop your body from making its own cholesterol. And your brain's made out of cholesterol. Your brain's made out of these fats. You need them. But also they had very low B12. And so the Oxford researchers thought that the main driver for this shrinkage in the brain was the critically low B12 that they had. And I see this in neurosurgery. You see vegans, vegetarians. They're your spinal cord up at the sort of as it comes out, sort of the brain stem coming down to the cervical spine. That should be very thick. There shouldn't be much CSF around that. It should fill up most of the space in that canal. And so it'd be very thick, and then it slowly tapers down and thins down as you go down through the thoracic spine. And so in vegans and vegetarians, that's thinned out completely. And so it's way thinner than it should be. So we see this on MRI in our patients quite regularly. And so the Oxford scientists thought that this was due to the critically low B12, right? The range for their B12, it was critically low, and they thought the cause of shrinking their brain by over 5% was 180 to 190, right? Which is still within that stupid range, right? So that's in the normal range. And so that professor in France is saying, "Oh yeah, it's normal, it's fine." No, that's a significant deficiency, yeah, you can survive a number of years without B12, but you can't survive forever, and it will cause harm.
So I think people are confused between extremes, but they don't see the nuances between what you call being optimal, right?
Yeah. Well, and also, the extremes, because if it doesn't kill you, then it's okay. It's good up until it kills you. Well, no, of course not. You're being harmed that whole time. It just hasn't become fatal yet. You're just like with cyanide. Well, you're not dying. I ate an almond and I didn't die. Okay, well, you can have some arsenic and you're not going to die. That doesn't mean that it's not harming you. So it's just being able to understand that there's levels of harm, and death is certainly a level of harm, but that's sort of the extreme end of harm. You don't want to be harmed along the way. So, why don't we think about what's not going to harm us, what's only going to benefit us? And that's just from eating what we're biologically designed for, which is meat. There's no animal nutritionists or vets that do, oh, well, let's do a study and see, what's the best, diet for an elephant, or a zebra or a jaguar or whatever. They're not doing these sort of studies because they're pointless. Because all you do is you go in the wild and you look and see what they eat. It's like, okay, they eat that and they're healthy and they don't have problems. They start eating other things, they get sick. Okay, great. Just feed them what they eat in the wild, right? Any zookeeper can tell you that if you feed an animal something it doesn't eat in the wild, that it gets sick, right? And that's why there's signs that the zoo say don't feed the animals. It makes them very sick to eat outside their normal diet. Okay, we're animals too. And so what we need to do, you don't need to go and look at a bunch of research papers that are bought and paid for and funded and even actioned by the food and drug companies who have a vested interest in having the answer support their product. You don't need to look at any of that. All you do is look at what humans have been eating in the wild since time immemorial. Well, it's been meat, and we haven't had any of these problems when we're eating that. Pre-agriculture, we had no signs of chronic disease and infectious disease, and our brains were bigger, our teeth and jaws were better, and all these other things were better. Immediately after agriculture, that changes. So you don't need all these studies. In fact, studies confuse the issue.
On that point of the brain size, that was the second point you mentioned, and I wanted to ask you something. I've heard many people arguing that, the brain, it's true, it's shrunk, but what they're saying is that it's because the connections between neurons are much more efficient. So have you heard that? Or
it's just people making things up. You're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. You're trying to make something fit that's not being supported by the evidence. So you show, and this is what ideologues do. They try to make up reasons and explanations why, the evidence that shows that they're wrong is actually, looks in a different way. That's a theory and they can say that, but what's their evidence? What's their proof for that? They have none. There's no way that we know one way or the other because we don't have a preserved brain where we can look at all the connections and synapses and things like that, pre-agriculture and post-agriculture. We only have the bones that remain, right? So we only know how large the skull was, which directly correlates to the size of the brain. And so because it's actually the brain growing that pushes out the bones of the skull and makes the skull grow bigger and pushes those out. If the brain stops growing, the growth plates seal, right? And so, your skull's not just going to keep growing unless you get like hydrocephalus, right? Which is, too much CSF in the brain. No, that doesn't make any damn sense. There's zero evidence of that. That's completely pulled out of their ass. And also that couldn't possibly be the case either, because again, this didn't take hundreds of years or thousands of years. This was immediately. It was 11% smaller for men, 17% smaller for women, immediately after agriculture. Right. So agricultural revolution, just pre and post agriculture, immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Shorter, smaller brains, sicker, worse teeth, poor wound healing, infectious disease, arthritis in the bones and the joints, and all these other sorts of problems. So no, that's not the case. That's not possible that's the case. There's zero evidence for that, and there's all the evidence is contrary to that.
Mm. On another topic, as you've been an athlete, so I'm sure you're concerned about how muscle works, and many people in today's world are experiencing chronic muscle pain. And myself, as a personal trainer and massage therapist for 15 years, I'm dealing with chronic muscle pain with clients or patients every day. So do you think that as motor neurons are responsible for muscle contraction, there would be a link between chronic muscle pain and a diet lacking the essential nutrients and vitamins for a healthy, pain-free muscle?
Well, certainly, having proper nutrition is obviously going to be very good for muscle health and neurological health and growth and recovery. I think a lot of the pain comes from the excess inflammation that's due to eating an improper diet that causes a lot of free radicals, causes a lot of oxidative stress and inflammation. And so, the seed oils, sugars, carbs, and a lot of these plant toxins that are the plant's way of telling you to go away, leave me alone, don't eat me, I'm going to hurt you. And as a deterrent to eating them, that a lot of those inflammatory factors and toxins that are coming in your body can make and exacerbate those issues and make them much more painful. Even just DOM, delayed onset muscle soreness, that goes away if you stop eating plants. It just goes away. And so if you're just eating meat, you don't get delayed onset muscle soreness. So you work out, it doesn't matter how hard you work out. Unless you injure yourself and you pull a muscle or something, you're not going to be sore the next day, not to any real degree anyway. As long as you have it out of your system for a few weeks, you just won't get sore anymore. And you have one cup of coffee, you'll be sore for a day or two after that, and it will persist. Just one cup of coffee. That's how damaging and inflammatory this stuff is. Ketones as well. Just having higher ketones directly suppress the inflammasomes that cause excess swelling and pain and the experience of those. So when you have increased inflammation, you have increased free radicals and oxidative stress and other sorts of nasty little chemicals bouncing around. Your expression of pain in, say, an injury or arthritis or muscle soreness or fibromyalgia or compressed nerve or any other sort of injury, that can exacerbate that and make that pain a lot worse. And then you're suppressing your ketones because your insulin is up, and insulin suppresses the formation of ketones. So you don't have enough ketones to help try to calm down this fire as well, and you just get a lot of inflammation. You get a lot of pain as a result. So there are a lot of patients that I've seen with chronic pain issues, chronic fatigue issues, but specifically we're talking about pain, that resolve these things. There's people with fibromyalgia and with radiculopathy, sciatica, sort of shooting nerve pain down their arms or legs, or both. And some of them even have surgery, decompressive surgery, and we just tell them, hey, look, after 2 years, that's as much healing as you're going to get, and that's going to be where you're at. And so, we try to, the pain persists, they're not getting better, and we keep looking at it and saying like, oh, look, there's nothing really there we can do. Sometimes you even go in and do surgery and be like, yeah, there's nothing else to decompress. There's nothing else going on here. The nerve's free and clear. There's nothing more we can do. And they're like, but I still have pain. I still have pain. And it's just like, well, I'm really sorry, but the nerve's damaged and we're not going to be able to repair that. It's just, it has to heal on its own. Then they go on to a carnivore diet. They get rid of all these plants. And within a few weeks, their pain is significantly reduced. And then sometimes it goes away completely. I have a video I did called like Fibromyalgia and Chronic Pain on YouTube. Just, you don't even have to watch the episode. Just look at the comments on the video. There are hundreds of people talking about how massively this affected their pain. People that had fibromyalgia and sciatica for 12 years. And they were on heavy opiates and heavy neurological drugs that can help with neuropathic pain, like Lyrica and things like that, that they've been on for over a decade. And they said, after a month on carnivore, I was able to come off opiates for the first time in over a decade. And I get my life back. I can actually do things now because I'm not just so doped up on drugs. Some people think that these people are just drug seeking, and maybe some are, but the vast majority of these people are in significant pain, and they need these medications to just survive because they're in so much pain. They kill themselves. Some people actually say that, and some people have done that, and it's very, very, very hard to see people suffering like that and not being able to help them with it. But just changing their diet has significantly helped quite a number of people in my experience.
And I think on those comments that you mentioned, I read them quite often. And the word "I got my life back" or the expression is quite often written. So that says a lot. But now I'd like to ask you something specific on another nervous aspect. On the last 10, 15 years or so, it seems that there has been a huge interest on the microbiome in the medical and nutritional field. And what we usually hear is that more diverse the microbiome is, better it is for our gut health. And we also hear that fiber is excellent for the microbiome. So as a carnivore dieter, I suppose that you may have a different view about this diversity argument. And based on your knowledge as a neurosurgeon, are there any forms of healthy or harmful interactions between a diverse gut microbiome and the nervous enteric system?
I'm not too much of an expert on how the microbiome affects our enteric system. I do know of some studies that seem to show that there actually is quite a significant interaction there. That the gut microbiome can actually send signals through our enteric nervous system, which is our you can sort of think of it as not even our second brain, but our first brain. That was actually where our cortex, our main, what we think of as our main brain, our central nervous system, actually developed from that. So we had this nervous system around our gut tube, and then that sort of started branching off into what we consider our brain. So that actually existed first evolutionarily. So that's sort of our first brain. This is our second brain. This is still the most important one, though. Let's not kid ourselves. But the microbes seem to be able to send signals and trigger certain pathways that actually tell us to say, like, crave sugar. If those bacteria start dying off and they start sending signals through our gut brain saying there's like, you need sugar. And so it starts screaming at us, and you get panicked. You start having these cravings. That can be from the die-off of your gut microbiome. There's also studies in mice where they identical genetic twins with one microbiome and then given another microbiome, and one gets very fat and the other stays very slender, eating the same food with the same sort of atmosphere and environment. And it's very interesting. Exactly the same, calories in, calories out, all that nonsense. No, it actually seems to make exactly the same inputs, and you get different results. So obviously it's much more complicated than that. Then they swap out the microbiome for, do like a fecal swap, and then the mouse comes right down. Now, the thing with that is that that's not, it's not really something that you can necessarily do to us, because, if you do like there's a fecal transfer, they did these on sterile gut. So they like just blasted them with antibiotics or just wipe out the gut and then give them fecal transfers. That could just reseed and take over. Whereas if you put in a fecal transfer, which is actually taking the feces of some other individual that has maybe a more favorable microbiome and actually physically implanting it in your colon. That's what you want to do. That's your business. But if you're not doing it in a sterile environment, then your microbes that are already there are going to compete and fight those things out, and they may not take hold in the first place. So that's something to think about as well. But as far as the diversity of the microbiome, and say no, you have to have fiber for that. Says who? I mean, again, this is all these things are just made up. Just like that person who said that well, the reason our brains are smaller is because they're just more advanced and they just have better synapses. I'm like, there's literally no evidence for that. You just completely pulled that out of your ass. Same thing with this. People just assume that you need that. They assume that you need fiber and all that sort of stuff for proper gut health. And what is that based on? It's based on pretty flimsy evidence. If you are eating what you're supposed to eat, you should be cultivating the microbiome and oral biome that you should have. Animals in the wild don't rot their teeth. Native Australians, Native Americans, Sub-Saharan Africans, when they're just eating meat, the Maasai, bright white teeth. They don't have dentists. They don't have cleaning and bleaching services and things like that. They don't even brush their teeth, right? Bright white teeth. Right? Why is that? Why is it that lions and hippos and giraffes and sharks, well, sharks lose their teeth, they replace them, but other animals that don't replace their teeth, why is it that they still have teeth? If you lose your teeth, you die in the wild. Like, you have to have your teeth. Your teeth stay with you your whole life, one way or the other. You either die with your teeth or without your teeth, right? And so you need them, right? So no animal is having teeth rot out of their head. That's because they have a normal oral biome as well. The bacteria in the mouth is such that it supports their oral health. When you start eating carbohydrates, that supports the bacteria that actually make acid that starts eating away at the enamel and causing cavities. The enamel is the hardest part of your body. It has the hardest structure in your body. And yet these things are just rotting away. Why is that? Because you're eating the wrong things. And so you have the wrong oral biome. So why would you think you'd have the right microbiome in your gut if you have the wrong oral biome in your mouth from the things that you're eating? It doesn't make any sense. Also, when you look at microbiome studies with the Inuit, when they're only eating meat, they have some of the most diverse and healthy microbiomes ever studied. And when people are now doing this themselves, and they're going from an omnivore diet or a plant-based diet or even a ketogenic, heavily meat-based diet with just salads every now and then, like a friend of mine, Ben Azadi, did. He went and they're finding they're getting massive improvements in their microbiome. So Ben has been keto. He has keto camp and all these other sorts of things. So he's been a real big proponent of an animal-based eating with ketogenic diet, but eating vegetables and things like that, non-sweet fruit and all that sort of stuff for a long time. So he's been doing this for a long time. He's been very healthy for a long time. It's not like he just came to this. So he's been doing a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet for a long time with all the fiber and the plants and all that sort of garbage, right? That are supposed to be good for your microbiome. He checked his microbiome. It was okay. it was all right. It wasn't anything to write home about, apparently. And then the recommendation was eat less meat, eat more fruits and vegetables, and more fiber. That's what's going to help you out. So he did the opposite of that. He ate no fruits and vegetables, no fiber, got rid of all of that, and ate a lot more fatty meat. And he checked it again, I think 3 or 6 months after that. And he said it had an absolutely stellar outcome. It was just perfect in every marker and every outcome. So it massively improved his health, doing the exact opposite of what they say. So again, it's just, you need fruits and vegetables and fiber for a proper microbiome. Actually, the evidence shows the opposite.
Okay. You mentioned calories in, calories out. So as personal trainers, I think I can speak for most of us. I would say that easily 80% of people are coming to us in order to find a way to lose fat mass. So their preconceived idea is that exercise will be the major key factor helping them losing whatever amount of extra fat they have. So that belief, of course, comes from the famous energy balance theory. Calories in, calories out, or calorie deficit. Eat whatever you want as long as you go to the gym and sweat it out. 98% of the time, this strategy fails. So can you tell us why exactly that strategy almost always fails, and why, depending on which macronutrients we will use, our metabolism will react differently when it comes to fat oxidation?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, the first reason that it's going to fail is because it's just a faulty concept. The idea of calories in, calories out is a fiction. I mean, this is just something that's just been repeated for so long that people just, oh yeah, that's what it is. You eat less than you eat less energy than you use, and you'll lose weight. You have to. Oh, it's a law of thermodynamics. Well, law of thermodynamics is you're talking about things in a vacuum. We don't exist in that. This is not a contained. This is not a contained system, right? It's not a closed system, and that's what this applies to. But also, we're not combustion engines. We're not steam locomotives. We don't burn things. So a calorie is a unit of heat energy. So what does that have to do with us? We don't burn things. We don't have that capability. We're chemical factories, and we have chemical interactions, and these chemicals have chemical interactions. So fiber is cellulose. Well, we don't have the enzymes to break apart cellulose. We can't get at those glucose molecules. That has calories. You can burn wood, and all those calories come right off of that, right? So, but we can't get that. You eat as much sawdust as you want. Chew on a block of wood if you want to. You're not going to get any energy from it. You're not going to get any calories, right? Because we're not burning these things. So that doesn't make sense, first and foremost. Think about it as well. Protein's the same way. Every molecule that our DNA codes for is a protein, is a string of amino acids. That's what our base pairs are coding for, are strings of amino acids. So you're putting on amino acid after amino acid, you're getting this big long chain of amino acids, and then they fold in a specific way that's chemically specific to the combination of amino acids that go on there, and they sort of make this molecule, and that goes around. So those are all made out of amino acids. So you eat protein, you eat amino acids, that's said to have 4 calories per gram of amino acids, but you're not using it for energy, right? First of all, you're not burning it. Second of all, you're not even using it for chemical energy, right? You're using it as structural components for all of the molecules that you make in your body. So what does it matter how many calories it has in the protein? It really doesn't matter, right? And what does it matter anyway? When the number, if you have a cold glass of water and a hot steaming glass of water, the hot steaming glass of water has more calories than the cold glass of water. Does the hot glass of water weigh more or less per unit ounce of water? Weighs exactly the same, because the grams are what weighs something, not the calories. Calories don't weigh anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you want less, you want to weigh less, you want to take in less grams, not less calories, you want less grams,
Mm-hmm.
right? So a way to think about it is um, is a is you have 9 calories per gram of fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or 4 calories per gram of carbs
Carbs.
and 4 calories per gram of protein. But really, when you are breaking this stuff down for chemical energy, it's probably more likely around 2.4 calories per gram of protein, right? Because you actually have to use energy in order to break it down to then
Mm-hmm.
utilize it. Okay, so what weighs something there? The calories or the grams? Well, the calories don't weigh anything. That's a unit of heat energy. So that's a different unit. The grams weigh something. So flip that equation around, and it's 1 gram per 9 calories for fat. But it's 2.2 grams of carbohydrates
Yeah.
per 9 calories of carbohydrates, right? And it's actually 3 grams of protein per
Mm-hmm.
9 calories of energy. So, first of all, it's useless because a calorie is not a calorie is not a calorie. You have fiber that doesn't give you anything. Fiber can actually block out 30% of absorption from your gut. So even if you're taking in carbs, you're taking in protein, you're taking in fat, the fiber can stop you from absorbing it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so who cares how much went in your mouth if it didn't even get in your body and it didn't do anything? Also, carbohydrates, they're saying that you can just boil everything down to the amount of energy that's released when you burn something. That's just sophomoric. It's just a complete, there's a complete ignorance of how biology and biochemistry works. And yet you hear people with supposed degrees in biochemistry saying this, which is just shocking to me that anybody could look themselves in the mirror and still hold these thoughts. Every carbohydrate molecule is a unique individual organic molecule with complex chemical interactions in your body and different hormonal interactions in your body. Same with amino acids, same with your fatty acids. DHA, EPA, these are used as structural components. We don't really use these for energy, right? So yeah, 9 calories per gram or 1 gram per 9 calories, and yet they're not used for calories. They're used as building blocks of material. Same with your amino acids. So your carbohydrates, yeah, those can get used as energy, but they also have hormonal interactions, right? So carbohydrates will all raise insulin. Fat does not raise insulin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, carbohydrates do, and insulin is a very busy hormone, and it can affect many other hormones in your body. It can affect your estrogen, your testosterone, your growth hormone, your leptin, your ghrelin. It can affect all sorts of different processes. It blocks autophagy. So this is what people say: you have to fast every 90 days or 120 days to get autophagy. So you can fast for 5 days. So you kick about autophagy, so you can replace out the bunged up parts of the organelles and parts of your cells and these zombie cells and all that sort of stuff. No, you don't need to do that. You just need to not eat carbohydrates because your insulin will be nice and low. When your insulin is low, you do that all the time anyway. So it's not that you stop eating and that causes you to actually do housekeeping on your body and your cells. It's that when insulin is high, it prevents you from doing that. So if you're just eating what you're designed to eat anyway, which is just meat, you're always going to be going through autophagy and replacing these things. You'll be much healthier at a cellular level as a result. So when you're eating carbohydrates, it raises insulin. Insulin wants to be at a very nice, low, stable level because it affects over 100 different mechanisms in your body. People can look this up. You can go to Wikipedia and look, and there's a list at the bottom of all the different things that insulin interacts with and interferes with. And you can obviously go to textbooks and find the same, but some people don't have access to that. So that's at least something to give you an idea of all the different things that insulin affects. So if your insulin's at a 5, which is nice number for fasting insulin, it's affecting all these processes at a 5. But then you eat a bagel and an apple, and all of a sudden it jumps up to 35. Okay, well, now it's affecting everything at a 35 and things are all out of balance. And then you do this chronically over years and your fasting insulin goes from 5 to 10 to 11 to 12 to 15 to 20 to 30. I had a gentleman come into my office the other day whose fasting insulin was 72. And that was after 24 hours of fasting, right? So he was very metabolically unhealthy. Thankfully, he's doing very, very well. I put him on a carnivore diet and just comes right down. And his weight came right down, and all these other things improved as well. But that's massive, and that was without eating anything. So this guy has pasta or sugar or something, and it boom goes up 106. I mean, who knows? It's massive, right? So now it's affecting everything at a 72 all the time. So that's obviously very damaging to your body because it's affecting all these other processes, right? So it's not just affecting your blood sugar, and this is what the American Diabetics Association needs to get through their heads, and all these other diabetics associations around the world, because they're all funded by the sugar companies, the food companies, and the pharmaceutical companies who are winning from this. They are making trillions of dollars when you just eat all the carbs that you want and then just buy a whole bunch of insulin. And they say, you don't have to tell your patients to stop eating carbs. They can eat as much carbs as they want, but just get them to take enough insulin. That's all you got to do. Well, of course they're going to say that because those are the recommendations from the drug companies. We're saying, yeah, we've studied this. And no, it doesn't matter how much carbs they eat as long as they have the requisite amount of insulin. Well, of course they're going to say that because they are the ones selling the insulin. But there are studies showing that if you aggressively treat HbA1c and blood sugar with just more insulin, not dietary issues, if you just aggressively treat it with insulin, so you're having very high insulin, exogenous insulin, and you get your HbA1c down to more normal levels, more people die, right? That's not because the blood sugar is down. It's because the insulin is super high and it's screwing up all these processes and making people very sick. And so that's not helping. And so it doesn't just drop your blood sugar. It affects all these other things. And one thing people need to remember when it comes to fat loss, and that's the important thing, is fat loss, not weight loss. Because muscle has weight, bones have weight. That's what you want. But fat also has weight. When you lose fat and you gain muscle, you may not lose any weight. I lost 23 pounds in 10 days, but then I didn't lose anything. Yeah. And he was, oh, well, you're stalling. You didn't lose anything for 6 months. Like, yeah, I didn't, but who cares? Because I was absolutely transforming in the mirror. I was getting very, very lean and very muscular. So I was replacing the fat I was losing with the muscle I was gaining. And it just happened to be just a perfect offset. I weighed 243 pounds on the nose every single morning for months. It wasn't a single day that it was 244 or 242. It was 243 on the nose every day. It didn't go into decimal points, but it was 243 every day. It was absolutely crazy. And I just thought that was hilarious. And so I just kept checking every day just to see, how long is this going to go? And it wasn't until I actually hurt my knee and I couldn't play rugby and I couldn't do squats that I started losing weight because I couldn't work out. And so I couldn't keep building up my legs. And so that actually, I lost weight that I didn't want to lose. So when we're talking about losing fat and improving our metabolic health, we have to talk about insulin. This is calories in, calories out. It's nonsensical, right? If you don't have insulin, it doesn't matter how many calories are coming in your mouth. You will not put on fat or muscle. It's very difficult to put on muscle as well. So type 1 diabetics don't make insulin. They cannot put on weight. They waste away until they die unless they get insulin. And then people that have insulin secreting tumors, called an insulinoma, they pump out massive doses of insulin. They get extraordinarily obese. It doesn't matter what they eat. As soon as something goes in their mouth, it's going in their fat. And they have terrible energy. It doesn't matter how much they eat. They always have such low energy. They always feel terrible because their insulin is so high. It's just in the fat, 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 in the fat. So they're always low blood sugar. They always feel like garbage. And they're just getting fatter and fatter and fatter. It doesn't matter what they eat. And so this is very hormonally driven. If you don't have insulin, you can't put on fat. Fat is the fat storage hormone, right? So to say that, no, it just matters how many calories you eat, how much energies can be burned and used for firewood. That's the only thing that matters, and ignoring the structural components, ignoring the bioavailability and the inability to absorb different things. the anti-nutrients actually block out absorption,
Yeah.
the hormonal effects that all of these things can have as well, and how that disrupts your body. You ignore basic biology and physiology, and so you're going to lose. If you're working on that paradigm, it's a bad paradigm, and you need to do better. You need to actually understand how the body works and how these hormones work. And when you look at that, it becomes actually quite easy. You manipulate the diet so that you manipulate your hormones in a positive direction. Really, what you do is you just start eating what you're designed to eat, and you just let your body get on with it, and you let your body sort of go back to normal. There's more knock-on effects. Things like leptin. Leptin is the satiety hormone that tells your body to stop eating. So we have this in our stretch receptors in our stomach. So this is why they told us to eat a bunch of fiber in the 80s. So if you eat a bunch of fiber, it'll just stretch out your stomach and it'll release leptin. You say, oh, we're full. So you'll trick your brain into thinking that you've eaten something when in fact they have almost no calories and nutrition in it. Well, your brain's a lot smarter than those people were, because it has a bit of leptin, but there are receptors in your stomach that actually track macros and micros. Your brain tracks nutrients. It does not track calories, and it doesn't track just leptin, that stretch receptor, right? It's looking for actual nutrients. As you have these highly palatable foods that it's like, oh yeah, eat this, eat this, eat this, eat this, and you're eating a whole bunch of fiber, and it stretches out, but your stomach's saying, there are no nutrients in here, keep eating. So you're starving, but you're also bloated and you feel like crap. So leptin does come a bit from your stretch receptors, and the opposite of that, when they're collapsed, is ghrelin comes out, and that's your hunger hormone. But most of your leptin comes from your fat cells. It's sort of a running gas gauge and showing your brain how much energy you have. That goes to your hypothalamus, and that affects all the hormones coming out of your hypothalamus and pituitary. Very important hormone. Insulin blocks leptin. So if you have elevated insulin, you block your leptin, your brain can't see its leptin, and so your brain thinks you're on empty. You have no insulin, and now maybe your ghrelin is up, and so it goes, oh my God, this is a problem. And so it causes you to overeat, because it's saying your brain gets a signal, you have zero energy reserves, and because your insulin is up, you can't mobilize any of your energy, because insulin forces energy into cells. It doesn't allow it to come out of cells. And so you start lowering your blood sugar and you can't bring it up. And so now your brain's panicked and saying, hey, if you don't eat now, you will die. And so we overeat. We can't trust how much we eat. And this is where the calories in, calories out thing comes from. Because you have to calculate all your macros and all this sort of stuff, because you can't eat intuitively. You can't eat like a koala or a polar bear where you just eat until you're done, right? What's telling you you're done? Something in your body is telling you that you're done, but nothing in our body tells us we're done. We'll just keep eating and eating and eating if we're eating that crap. So that should tell you that is crap, that's nothing you should eat. So if you're eating what your body's designed to eat, you should be able to listen to your body's signal. And so if you're eating just meat, you get to a point where meat just doesn't taste good. You just go, I think I'm done. And without ever counting calories, you'll know exactly when to finish, and your body perfectly tracks all this. When you don't do that, your leptin gets deranged, your ghrelin gets deranged, your insulin gets deranged. Fructose is another carbohydrate. So all these carbohydrates will raise insulin. Insulin will do all that. But different carbohydrates have different hormonal responses and interactions. So fructose will raise insulin, but it will also independently block leptin and independently upregulate ghrelin. So you get this compounding effect when you have fructose sweetened foods such as fruit, honey, but obviously processed refined sugars and processed foods that have just all this fructose dumped into it, which is table sugar or high fructose corn syrup, or honey. Pick your poison. And so that causes you to significantly overeat, and it can cause a lot of other problems too. Addictive eating, just from trying to chase your tail with your carb high and insulin highs and lows. Fructose gives a dopamine response to the reward centers of your brain to quite a strong degree. Obviously, you can do other things that give a dopamine response. This gives a very strong dopamine response, just like drugs, like actual illicit drugs like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines. And there are MRI studies in humans showing that fructose can damage and kill the same areas of your brain as methamphetamines, to the same extent as methamphetamines, right? Because these dopaminergic parts of the brain, they're responding to dopamine. Dopamine is an excitatory molecule, and it sort of turns on the neurons. When neurons are firing, they're actually getting damaged. And so they have to cycle off. And if you keep turning them on with dopamine, it says, okay, look, hey, we're damaging here. We're going to lower our receptors for dopamine. This is a protective measure. And so this is tolerance, right? So someone's doing cocaine, they do cocaine once and they're like, wow, that's amazing. Next time they need a little more and a little more and a little more until now they need a lot more. And eventually they're screwed. They can't get a proper dopamine response because now they've kept these things on for so long. They've actually killed off those areas of the brain, and now they're really addicted to this stuff because they're dependent on it, right? The same thing can happen with fructose. Same thing can't happen with hugs. I'm sorry. It's like, it's just this happens with extreme drugs that give a serious dopamine signal. So these are very harmful substances. These are addictive substances, and they have extreme hormonal disruption as well, and that can be very significant for overall health and weight loss. But my biggest concern is the health ramifications. That insulin resistance, high insulin levels can cause so many different problems: hormonal disruption, low testosterone in men, low estrogen in women, PCOS in women, fibroids in women. Alzheimer's is now being called type 3 diabetes. PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, is the leading cause of infertility in women, is being called type 4 diabetes. And so many other type 2 diabetes, obviously, is going to be from carbohydrates and insulin issues, and so many more. I mean, it's just that there are so many problems and chronic diseases that are brought about by these hormonal disruptions that we get from eating the wrong foods.
Okay.
And just physiological disruptions that we get from eating the wrong foods.
Okay. I know the time is running. I would like, if you still have 5 minutes, ask you a last questions. As this is something I've encountered, it seems that whenever someone understands logically, when you speak to on a one-on-one session, and acknowledge the physiological or anthropological or medical arguments that promote a carnivore diet, then the social life aspect of eating and drinking is very often seen as a major issue for people who haven't started that form of nutrition. So why do you think that the idea of getting away from all the crap food seems to be a threat for people? Is it addiction, cultural, personal identity, habits? What is your view on that? And what would be your advice to anyone who want to start a carnivore diet but struggle to make their choice a reality?
Yeah, well, I think it is, different for different people. I mean, some people, have that cultural mindset, like, well, they just enjoy that social aspect. They like to try different foods and go to different restaurants, and their mom really likes cooking, certain cultural dishes, and when they go there, their mom doesn't understand, like, oh, hold on a second, why aren't you eating? Why are you eating that? And they sort of worried about that. I've certainly heard that. A lot of it, I think, does come down to sort of addictive eating. We treat food as drugs, and we're sort of in the same way we treat drugs, which is we treat it as something entertaining, something as entertainment. It says, oh, this will be fun. And yes, maybe it's not good for me. Maybe that, that cake or pie or pizza or whatever isn't good for me, but, I enjoy it. And that's what's important too, is making me happy and all that sort of stuff. That sort of short-term pleasure response at the sacrifice of your long-term health is the same relationship we have with cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs. And so I think that's inherently a pathological mindset, and we have to break away from that and understand that food is for nutrition. Yes, you can enjoy it. I've never not enjoyed a steak, and that's the thing, is that if you're hungry, meat will taste amazing, and when it stops tasting amazing, or it doesn't taste good anymore, I should say, it's you're not hungry. Your body's telling you that to stop eating. It's fine. And so you will always enjoy meat if you're hungry. So, just listen to that. The social pressures are a bit of a funny one because, other people just or just think that this is weird, that it's like, oh, you're doing something different. Like, why are you doing that? People can feel a bit self-conscious because they don't want to, maybe they're not ready to talk about it, or maybe they don't want all the questions saying, oh, you're going to kill yourself, you're going to get a heart attack, you're going to get all these other sorts of things. Thankfully, the way has sort of been paved at this point, because a lot of people have heard of the carnivore diet and they're starting to understand that cholesterol is a complete fraud and saturated fat is actually good for you. And there are a lot of people that do this and are becoming very healthy with it. So at least it's something that people are understanding. It's more of a household name at this point, where people have at least heard about it and understand the concept, as opposed to when I started doing this and was talking to people out, they were like, you do what? And they were just thought I was absolutely out of my mind. And the thing is too, is that most people don't care what you eat. And we don't realize that. When I was doing this in my early 20s, I wasn't doing carnivore. I wasn't doing anything. I just wasn't going to eat plants. And so I never told anybody that. I just didn't do it. And so there'd be a plate that would come at a restaurant. I'd just eat the parts that I wanted to eat. No one said a thing. You know, I would eat, I bought what I wanted to at the store. I cooked and ate what I wanted to. And that was it. You know, a couple people knew what I was doing and the reasons why I was doing it. And, they knew going into it, and they just, there's never said anything. No one else said a thing. It never came up once. And then when I was, then 38 and I was doing carnivore, I did feel a bit weird, because now I was doing something specific, and there was this whole big reason why. And so it came up more, because I was obviously much more self-conscious about it. And so, I felt I had to sort of defend it preemptively, whereas when I just ignored it and just ordered what I want, ate what I want, no one said a thing. And so if you sort of get over that stigma in your own mind, the stigma that you have with it, and just eat what you want, you go out to eat, there's always meat on the menu, unless you go to like a full-on vegan restaurant. And then you can just, drink water and just hang out and be social, just be like, I'm not really hungry, nothing's really looking good, and just eat later. Or you just order a steak, or order the fish and just ask for the sauce on the side, and just eat the fish and don't eat the rest. I can't think of a single time in my life that I've watched people with me at a restaurant and saw what part of their meals they ate and what they left. I've never cared. I've never looked at that before. I can't imagine someone else has been looking at my plate either and seeing what I ate and what I didn't eat. They just don't care. People are more interested in their own meal and their own lives than they are in what you're doing. It's just, so I don't think it's too much of a concern. If, as long as you're not concerned about it, other people won't be concerned about it, I think.
Okay. Great. Well, I don't want to take more of your time, Anthony. I know you have other things to do. So it was a real pleasure. And again, thank you very much. I mean, you've been one of the first I've listened, and I got educated on the, let's say, like Dr. Canberry say, the proper human diet. So I'm very happy that you could come on the Carnivore Renaissance channel, and I try to name it. I mean, I found that name because I really think, in a way, for many people, it is a renaissance. When you've been, healed or not feeling so good, and all of a sudden you rediscover that power. It's like a renaissance. So, well, thanks to all your work and commitment to bring the word out and make yourself available for helping people.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I'm glad you're making a channel and getting more of the word out there. And I agree. I think it is a renaissance. The Renaissance was really a rediscovery of the ancient knowledge of the Greeks and the Romans, and that's sort of what we're doing here. We're rediscovering what we've known for thousands of years, for hundreds of thousands of years, that this is the way we're supposed to eat, and this is how we can be the healthiest that we can be. And, so we're sort of getting out of the dark ages of nutritional sciences and nutritional recommendations, which made us very sick. And we are the fattest and sickest that we've ever been in human history. And clearly that's not from eating red meat and fat, because we've been reducing all of that over the decades, and it's only gotten worse. And so if the answer were a bunch of plants and garbage that we're eating now, we wouldn't be in the problem that we're in. And these are brand new diseases and brand new problems and brand new food to our species, and that, I think, is the problem.
If people want to contact you, how do they do? Do you have any specific platform for consultations or things like that?
Yeah, so my main social media would be Instagram. That's just Anthony Chaffee, MD. Twitter is Anthony_Chaffee, X, whatever. And my YouTube channel is Anthony Chaffee, MD as well. And those are my main ones. And then my podcast is just called The Plant Free MD, and that's on any podcast platform that people care to look at. If people want to contact me, they can try on Instagram. I get in the hundreds of messages a day now, so I really can't respond to everybody, unfortunately, even though I'd like to. But I do have a Patreon where people get more access. We have like weekly Q&As and meetings where we just sit down and just chat on Zoom and things like that. And and then in some of the tiers be able to sort of message directly and ask questions and all that sort of stuff. So if people are interested in that, that's Anthony Chaffee, MD, as well on Patreon. But I do try to make all my videos and everything like that free and available to people on YouTube, so they can at least get that information. And I do sort of weekly Q&As or even twice weekly Q&As on YouTube, so people can check those out and try and ask questions there.
Good. So we'll put the links below the video, and then people can use those informations. Thank you again.
Sounds good.
I wish you a great day, and hopefully things will get better for most of us.
I hope so too. Thanks, man. Good to see you.
All right. Bye.
Yeah.